a project page for D Street on the ACDA website. So we are going to be doing several presentations, and one of which we just were asked, Daniel was just asked to present in front of the Downtown Community Council for their July meeting. So we're going to continue doing these little things and getting people updated on this vision plan that that has been put together for the D Street area. So with that said, I think we've got 14 people on, and I've got a chat. One sec here. Eric. Oh, hi everyone. Thank you for posting that. So I think what we're going to do is get this going, and I'm going to start off with introductions, and I think it would just be helpful if we could all just identify who we are, and maybe it might be just easier so we can get this going if everybody can, in the chat right now, identify who they are and who they're representing, and that would be helpful for everybody here rather than going from face to face. From that point going forward, I'm Melinda Gant from Anchorage Community Development Authority, and this was a project that we took on back in 2022, we've done a lot of public engagement for this area-wide for D Street. One of which, the really big one, was the first Friday at the Anchorage Museum, and you'll be seeing that information. And this has all been brought upon from the collaboration between the City Long Range Planning Department, Daniel McKenna Foster, and ACDA, and as well as Stantec, who is our contractor, and brought to you by a brownfield grant of money that we were awarded, and we were able to do something like this. So I'm going to hand this over to Daniel and to start doing the update, Daniel, and thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Melinda. Hi, everybody. Again, my name is Daniel McKenna Foster. I'm a long-range planner at the municipality. Yeah, we're going to talk about the D Street Area-Wide Planning Project, which came out of our EPA Brownfield project. And without further ado, I'll get into the slides. So this all started with the 2019 Brownfield Grant and other projects. The municipality has gotten a number of Brownfield grants from the EPA. You know, brownfields are usually to sort of do assessment and then ultimately clean up on sites. Traditionally, it was for like factories in Pittsburgh and stuff, but it's been extended where it could be, you know, oil tanks, dry cleaners, anything where there's something in the ground or there's uncertainty about what's in the ground. And then the EPA Brownfield Grant sort of bears the cost for that to sort of take away that little piece of development cost. So in the 2019 Brownfield Grant, I think we had a $600,000. We did brownfield site assessment throughout the bowl. Area-wide planning is a component of it. Most of the grant you have to use for assessment, but there's always a bit of money, and you can do area-wide planning if there are a few properties near each other that had some sort of contamination or potential contamination, which allows for this sort of larger sort of activity. So in downtown, as you all know, there's been a lot going on the past few years. We had Smart Growth America came up. There was the Our Downtown plan update. Then there was the Downtown Code zoning update. And then this was a piece of that. So there's a lot of municipal attention on downtown these days. We're also right now doing the Downtown Streets and Engineers study, which is looking at what can we do with the rights of way downtown? Can we narrow them? Can we change the ownership? Can we put in diagonal parking? What do we have to upgrade? That sort of thing. So D Street Area-Wide Plan was part of that, and it was completed in 2023. And so great news, the MOA was also awarded last year another $1 million in EPA Brownfield assessment grants. So if you or anybody you know is looking at a site or interested in a site and you're not sure about what's underneath the soil, by all means get in touch with us. The grant isn't operational yet, but we will have a ton of money to do those assessments. And basically, if you are the owner and you are not responsible for the causing contamination, you're usually eligible for this money. So the D Street Area-Wide Plan was selected because there were a number of sites that we looked at, we did assessments on. And there are a number of properties in public ownership, which makes it a little bit easier. So this was really a focus area for ACDA and the Muni, because this is an area where we can think about, okay, what can we do here? If there's going to be a bit of infrastructure investment or attention, what's a good place to focus? This is one, because as you can see, there are some buildings, but there's also a lot of potentially developable space. So this was the area we identified centering on D Street. It's great because you've got sort of the Denina Center, you got the Park Strip, you got the museum and some of the federal buildings. So we started doing, sorry, was there a question? Melinda, did you want to add anything?
No, Daniel, somebody bleeped.
Oh, cool. So we started with stakeholder engagement in the fall of 2022, actually, just talking to property owners in the area and thinking about, well, what would you like to see here? What are some obstacles? And we heard a lot of really good feedback. And some people said, I don't really want to be involved in this project. That's totally cool. Some people said, I'd like to see this and this. I'm worried about that. That was our starting point. This you're seeing pictures of, we went to First Fridays. I think this was February, maybe March of 2023. And we heard from a ton of people just talking about what they want to see downtown. Of course, this is a sort of big picture exercise. You know, people are saying, oh, we want a Korean spa and a greenhouse and a water park. But that's good. It's good for people to think about and envision the stuff that's just really exciting and would make it pretty cool downtown. So I think that night the museum got like, I don't know, a couple hundred people, like 500 or 600, maybe more. So it was a really good event, and we got a lot of really good feedback from this. So things that we heard, a lot of people said, well, it'd be nice if D Street was sort of a pedestrian street centerpiece. It'd be nice to connect the adjacent museum and federal buildings. It would be good to take advantage of the location of the Park Strip and solar access. It's interesting, right? Like there, the city doesn't really engage with the Park Strip that much. And it could be in the downtown plan, there was a lot of talk of, oh, these sort of brownstones are housing along the Park Strip so people can cross the street and go play tennis. Some people said build housing first. That's a priority. That's a big priority of the downtown plan. Encourage north-south orientation. Of course, solar access is a very hot topic in Anchorage all the time. People said don't build any more parking, and ensure quality streetscapes, outdoor gathering spaces, and pathways. So just a little bit more about the public outreach in the plan, and I'll put the link in the chat at the end. You can see everything we heard from all sorts of people, especially the stakeholders. It's all in there. And ultimately, so working with the consultant, all the stuff we heard, we came up with a sort of vision plan for what might be feasible. And so this is a bit of light pro forma work, a bit of light urban planning work, a little bit of light public outreach work to think about, well, what could potentially be possible in some of these spaces. So I think everything red on this image is something new, and it's potential, right? This is what could be there. This is what there might be some market interest for, and this is what it kind of could look like fitting within what the plans are and what people said. And you'll see the center is D Street, this sort of pedestrian spine. Now, it's interesting, as we're working on the downtown streets engineering study, we've heard from transit, and they have some ideas about E Street becoming a bus street, depending on where the transit center goes. So this process is sort of evolving, and that's something to consider as well. But this is really focused on D Street as the central corridor. And again, of course, a big piece and a big value of any of these plans is just showing people what could be potentially. Again, I know with some builders out there, you say that's never going to pencil, that's not going to be built. We're still thinking big picture, dreaming big. So maybe it could be, maybe it will be. And what might it look like to get people thinking about, oh, downtown Anchorage really could be better and better. We could have more cool stuff. We could have different types of housing. We could have some infill. We could have different types of pedestrian streets. So that's sort of one of the big pieces of this plan, and it can connect really well to the Park Strip. Of course, we are at every public meeting. You never show renders of the winter time, so we made sure to have a little bit of winter rendering in there. But again, as you can see, everything is sort of facing south, recognizing that the winter sun and including some of the heights on there. So a big component of the plan is, of course, streetscape and thinking about, well, the street is generally public property. It's usually a public obligation to develop that and to put in sort of street infrastructure, street furniture, trees, sidewalks, and all the stuff that goes along with that, right? In all of our processes, we've heard, you know, ACDA has some really important needs and considerations for where their meters are. ADP has some really important considerations for how they clear the sidewalks. If you put trees in, you have to make sure that the trees have enough space that they're going to survive, not just be planted and then turn into a stick, you know, the next year. And then there's figuring out, well, if we have this much right of way, how much can we allocate to this use, Do we want it to be one way, two way, that sort of thing. Another thing the plan did is it identified these opportunity sites. And again, these are, if you see this and you say, I own that property and I don't want anything to do with it, this is an opportunity. This is an area where maybe potentially something could be done here. And this is just sort of an informational starting point to encourage people. Let's think about, maybe people can look at this plan, come together and say, hey, maybe we could try something cool there. And then the plan has an action plan, which sort of has a list of things and the people to carry it out, who needs to do it. Thinking about programming, opportunity site designation, making sure we get some housing diversity and that sort of thing. And I mentioned a bit at the beginning, but there are a lot of efforts going on downtown right now. We have the transit center study, which is looking at locating a new transit center, which could potentially impact this project or impact where sort of the street improvements go. We have the downtown streets engineering study, which is really looking at maybe taking back ownership or management of 5th and 6th, maybe changing some of the one ways to two ways, maybe redeveloping or changing the design of some of the streets. The one thing we've heard from talking with a number of pretty much every stakeholder is everybody wants the speeds to be reduced downtown. That's the one thing everybody agrees on. Tour operators, ADP, ACDA, the base, all sorts of people. And then finally, the Roger Brooks assessment, when Roger Brooks came through, what it was 2 years ago now, I think, talking about this is how you make a streetscape good. Here's how the sign should look. Here's how the parking should look. And then the D Street specific area concept. And then within this, we have one particular area, Block 102, which is really more sort of ACDA's wheelhouse. Melinda, do you want to go into that, or should we go into that later?
No, this is perfect timing. I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to Mike Robbins. And Mike can start talking about the Block 102 focus from there.
Thank you, Daniel and Melinda both. So, and thanks everybody for being here today. I think this is an important follow-up to the process we went through to complete this sort of vision plan and give everyone an idea of what it could look like. Again, you look at this aerial view of this section of downtown, and I wish I could say that this is unusual, but you could go block to block in a lot of our downtown, and most of it, as a matter of fact. And what you'll see is a really similar picture. You'll see lots of surface parking lots, scattered buildings. Unfortunately, downtown developed a lot like the rest of the city over the last several decades, which is there wasn't, I don't know if there was not enough vision, but we said, hey, what are we going to do here? Well, let's just put a parking lot here. So that was one of the things that Roger Brooks said. And one of the things I heard from every group that's visited here since I've been here for the last 3 years, which is that Anchorage has more downtown surface parking that's not utilized or is underutilized than any place else they've visited. And so we took a look at, of course, when the new administration took over, one of the things they said is, of course, they made housing a priority. And so we took a look at where we thought we could have some impact on housing in downtown. Obviously, downtown allows us to build with increased density, and we all know that's been just a challenge for the whole city. So Block 102 is currently owned by the state of Alaska. It's actually owned by the HFC, but it's a state-owned property. And right now, it's parking lot, and it sits right across from the park strip. And what we envisioned when we first started working on the project was we envisioned it as sort of being an anchor for this D Street plan. We've also been working on the other side of this square, if you will. And when you looked out at the JCPenney's garage, we currently manage that, and we've been in discussions with JCPenney's for several years to try to work out some sort of a redevelopment of that piece of property as well. But to Block 102, what we envision, and I think if you were to look at the sort of the vision renderings that Daniel showed you, we envision it as being high density housing with some mixed use commercial, giving people a chance to, on the front side of 9th Avenue there, be able to take advantage of the park strip. We are focused at ACDA on attainable housing, which is different than affordable housing or different than market rate housing. It's kind of that middle sweet spot in the marketplace where there is no real building or construction going on right now, which is at 80 to 120% of AMI, which means that a family can earn somewhere between $80,000 and $120,000 a year. It's kind of that mid-market segment. It's not subsidy based. It's based on, a working family, someone who's building their family. And so that's what we envisioned here, was maybe some condominiums on the 9th Street side, and then a multi-level, high density building, along with, like I say, some mixed use commercial downtown. So Block 102 we see as really a transformational opportunity, not only for the D Street area, but for all of the city. I believe that the density that it's called for in the Our Downtown plan is like 287 units on that site, which is a lot. But imagine what it would happen to that area if we were able to bring in 300 new families. It would really transform that part of the city. So that's kind of our vision for Block 102, and it's something we did arrange a trade between the state and the city. We ran into some snags because of the value of the land that was proposed to be traded, and so we're currently in negotiations to try to purchase that property. So that's kind of my Block 102, I guess, overview, if you will. But I'm certainly willing to answer any questions if anybody has anything specific to Block 102.
Thank you, Mike. I think going forward, I've asked everybody in the chat if they could put their questions in. I think we'll start off with, it looks like Chris had a question for Daniel. Is there a definition of what an opportunity site is? Daniel, are you able to answer that question for Chris?
I'll have to look back through the plan, but it doesn't have an official designation like, an opportunity zone or one of those federal programs or something like that. I think it was just sort of, this is a site that maybe if people were interested, we could talk about, or we could maybe do something there. Or it should be maybe a priority of the sites we look at first if there were going to be some projects.
I want to mention, Daniel, and I think Chris already knows, is that one of the reports that you mentioned, I think it was Smart Towns that came in for downtown?
Smart Growth America, yeah.
America, and I think they did identify certain areas, and I think maybe they had coined it as opportunity areas for future development that would spur on downtown development, I think. And I'm not sure if that's what Chris was talking about in his question. Chris, did you want to clarify that question?
Thanks. No, I think Daniel, your first response answered my question. I was just curious. I didn't see it in the executive summary. I was just curious if the full D Street plan uses a working definition of opportunity site that you could share, and I'll scan it, but it sounds like you're saying no, generally not. We just said these are areas that have great potential should they be redeveloped. Yeah, and then for the group, we'll be following up. If we don't have a clear defined answer in this, we'll definitely be following up with everybody. It looks like Johnny has a question. He said, shared early on, but is there any status updates on the JCPenney's garage or Nordstrom ownership intentions? I'm going to fall on Mike on that one.
I think that it's no secret that ACDA has been working on redeveloping the Nordstrom's garage, putting something new, exciting on there. But I can't give you any specific updates right now because there's discussions going on, but because of agreements and things that are in place, it's difficult to discuss them in an open forum.
Thank you, Mike. Haley has a question. Is there an existing building, say 720 D Street? Are these plans for improvements around the building, or are there some plans that include reworking current existing building? And Haley, I believe, Haley, you run a business in that area. Can you name your business, please?
We're Blush Boutique at 720 D Street. There's 3 small businesses in the building.
Thank you, Haley. I'm going to fall on Daniel on that because I know there was some discussion around the current infrastructure. So Daniel, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so the plan doesn't have, it doesn't say we're gonna tear this down or build this, or, you know, if you have an existing building, it has to look like this. It's really about sort of, to go back to what Melinda said, when Smart Growth America, which is an organization that looks at sort of city development, one of their big things is just pick a few areas and focus on it, and then spend some time on that area. So we kind of did that over your Debenham's property in K Street, and now the focus is over here. So if you have an existing building, you think, well, what am I going to get out of this? It's sort of thinking about, well, what do you think would work the best? If this goes forward and say ACDA says, okay, we've got our new project, we're going to eventually start talking about infrastructure. And then the question will be, well, what are we going to do with this road? And maybe that road goes along your business. And you can say, well, it would be really nice if we could get better vehicular access here, or it'd be really nice if we could get better pedestrian access. So the plan doesn't constrain anybody or make you do anything, but it's an opportunity to open the door for when this process goes through to make sure that you're in it and say, this is what we would like to see out of future changes. A big thing that I didn't mention before is alleys, right? Like, so throughout all those blocks, there are alleys coming through. And a lot of people said, well, just build the whole block. Dealing with alleys is kind of tough. It's sort of, you have to deal with whether PM&E wants to give it up or if there's utilities under there. But that's the kind of thing too, is maybe you have a business and it's on an alley and you want to take access out or not. This is sort of opening the door to have that conversation and bring everybody to the table. And kind of to Chris's thing, the muni does have some processes in place. There's one called a reinvestment focus area. It's never been used. It's an idea that you sort of establish an area, and within that you can look at tax abatements, tariff changes, or something with, you know, infrastructure improvements. That's a possibility. I don't want to say that that's, you know, a major focus or anything, but part of this plan is sort of asserting that, okay, the municipality is interested in this area. We've committed resources to this area, and we will continue to commit resources to this area. At least if we're going to do anything, right? It's like, let's focus here, let's stick with it and keep going downtown. So sort of a long-winded answer, but if you have an existing business, it's the kind of thing to think, well, what would you like to see, or what would you be worried about if things started to change around you? And those are the things that the plan can sort of be the platform for addressing those, I'd say.
Perfect. And then thank you, Daniel. I've got another question from John H. I think that's John Hendricks. And I'm going to, I think I'm going to lean on Mike to answer this question, although I believe the very first question, why are they moving the transit center? Whenever they move it will reduce property values. So John, just for clarity, I just need to ask the question because this is outside our block focus. Are you asking that question because Daniel mentioned that the People Mover is looking at E Street as part of their area that they want to maybe have a drop-off area? Is that correct? So I'm not hearing from John. I think what I'm going to do, oh, he said yes. Okay, so perfect. So Daniel, I think there's a little bit of confusion when you mentioned about the East Street and People Mover. Can you provide more information on about your comment about East Street and People Mover looking at the East Street area?
Yeah, and I might, sorry for any motion sickness, I might go back to one of the original. I'll just go back to this one. Yeah. So and I can't speak for transit. I don't, know their total plans, but I think the transit center is looking to relocate just so they can make sure they have turnaround area, right, and they can deal with curb space. They're probably, there are a couple of sites. One of the sites, if they selected it, or maybe multiple, I don't know, E Street would then become a very convenient way to move buses to and from that site. So it would be interesting, the focal point of this plan is D Street, but if E Street had buses coming and going with more frequency, that could potentially mean better access for people coming and going. So that's why we mentioned it, just because, transit said, oh, we'd love to have just E Street be only for buses. And that's a sort of big change, but maybe it's only for buses and other types of users or limited for certain times. But either way, it would be probably a slower, maybe limited access street, which contributes to the overall feeling of this place. And to the comment about housing, I could speak to that a little bit too, is the focus from our downtown plan is get more people living downtown. And again, we all know that not everybody wants to live in this type of environment, but there is demand for some people to live in that type of environment. And when you have more people in one place, it just makes it a little more vibrant for everybody. You get more eyes on the street, more activity. It's better for businesses. You get more sort of pass-through traffic. And so that is a priority. And again, I don't think our downtown plan wasn't meant to solve the problems of the entire municipality, but it was intended to sort of revitalize downtown. And a key component of that is getting people downtown. And one of the best ways to get people downtown is to have them live there, so that then, they're just much more likely to sort of go out and circulate.
So thank you, Daniel. And I think I'm going to kind of lean on Mike a little bit. And this is about the question that John had about Alaskans are pretty independent people. What studies show with that remote working population, will people move downtown? And we actually have a good test case simply about the one apartment complex that we just recently built, which was Block 96. Mike, did you want to answer that question for John?
So I certainly will agree with John that Alaskans tend to be very independent people. But one of the things that we are seeing is that the younger generation, folks that are not my age, of course, but my son, for example, he's 25. He'd love to live downtown in a small apartment. He doesn't want to have a big yard. He wants a different kind of lifestyle than what I wanted when I was a kid. And so by building more density housing downtown, we really accomplish two things. We create much needed housing, and we're able to provide the kind of lifestyle that will help us to attract folks to our city. When you put people in an area and they start to live in it, it starts to change the complexion of that area versus just businesses that are open during the day and then leave at night. And as far as the remote working goes, John, there is certainly a trend towards remote working, but if you're living downtown and you have the ability to live in a place where if you look at Block 102, or excuse me, Block 96 as an example, they have a co-work space in there. They have a little gym in there. They have like the units are very, I don't want to call them micro units, but they're small units. But then they provided amenities inside the building where, for example, you could go sit around a fireplace and have interaction with other humans and other folks who live in that building, as well as, they put a big flat screen TV in an area in there where people could enjoy other folks' company. But again, it's that smaller sort of, again, it was just different when I was a kid. We wanted to buy a big house, and now the younger generation is looking for a more kind of a minimalistic sort of living style, I think. And they want to be downtown. Everything, when you look at all the housing and you look at the studies, they want to be downtown because they perceive, for example, that, downtown has got the highest concentration of restaurants in the city. When you think about entertainment, downtown has the highest concentration of entertainment in the city. And so all of those things attract people to downtown. But if there's nowhere for them to live, then it just is a different focus. So I hope that answers your question, John.
Thank you, Mike. Johnny made the comment here, and I think we all know this, is that housing equals 24-hour downtown important security and economic driver. And Mike highlighted about changing the focus, and I think that kind of just explains it all right there, is the 24-hour downtown investment. Johnny also makes a remark, does the JCPenney's hotel replacement still pencil with the projected transit center and the 4th Avenue Theater hotel buildouts? Can that redevelopment pencil as housing mixed use instead of visitor focused development? Maybe these projections are in the plan. Mike, you want to answer that one?
Sure. So I believe the answer to your first part of your question is that would a JCPenney's hotel or something on top of that, if there was a new garage built there, would it still pencil? I believe the answer would be yes, it would. Alaska is a very unique hotel market, and we have a strong need here for more rooms. I know it seems counterintuitive when you look at the number of rooms that get built here, and the number, there's another hotel going on C Street, but everything, all of the studies, and anytime I talk to a hotelier or someone who's potentially thinking about investing in this market, we are just barely keeping up, or actually not keeping up with the demand for hotel rooms in Anchorage. for the summer travel, and now for the shoulder seasons as that's increased as well. So would it pencil as a housing development instead of a hotel? That's very possible. But we haven't had anyone approach us to put housing on that site. So it's, it's not something that we've run much of an economic study on. So.
All right, we're closing on our questions. Does anybody else have any other questions that they would like to be answered? Not too late if you want to put those in the chat. And it looks like Daniel's got his hand raised. Do you have a question, Daniel?
Oh, I just wanted to make a comment speaking about the JCPenney garage. So as part of the recent downtown code update, as some of you probably know, a few blocks downtown have a very special height limitation on them. But as part of that code update, that height limitation was raised. So there's now a higher height allowance there. So hopefully that will help too. But I think it's always helpful if when we hear, at least in the planning part, we hear about, well, here's an obstacle that we're running into in terms of development. It's helpful for us to know that and hear that so that when these processes do go through, we can hopefully respond to it. So again, if anybody, if anybody's ever thinking about this kind of stuff, I'd love to do X, Y, and Z, but I can't because of this. That would always be really helpful information to know. So, thanks.
Thank you, Daniel. Jenna actually had a very specific question. What is the new height allowance? Do you recall?
I think it's 200 feet, but I'm going to look in the code. It was a very, very contentious decision at first, and then it seemed to not really be such a big deal. But okay, so for block 71, which is this area, I believe, the northwest quarter is 200 feet, southwest quarter is 200 feet, south half is 200 feet. So it's all 200 feet. And previously it was like, I don't know, 100 feet or something. So now the heights there are higher.
Johnny,
Previously, it was based on a bonus table, right, Daniel? Like you would have to build 4 floors of parking before you can go to that height.
Well, I think in those specifically, they were protected through this kind of weird deed restriction that wasn't a deed restriction to protect the park. So I don't even know if the bonus is applied to that. So yeah, I'm glad to provide.
It was the daylight, Johnny, that specifically for Town Square. And so Daniel's team, they went ahead and did a daylight study and tested the sunlight to make sure how high, really, what was the actual height that would not affect daylight. And then that's how they got a readjustment to that number.
And we found that the biggest impact on sunlight on the park is the pack. So it's not even those 3 blocks south. So anyway, I digress.
Yeah, thank you, Radhika. That is correct. So, and there was a study done, and so I'm glad Daniel's team did that because it allows for a little more flexibility with the development of that corner piece of our project focus. Does anybody else have any other questions? I guess what we're going to do is we're going to continue talking about this, as I mentioned.
I think Johnny had another question.
Oh, Johnny, please.
Sorry, full of questions. I was excited about this conversation. My apologies. Did the recently passed state statute or regulation about individual municipalities having tax abatement ordinance potential have impact to what can happen in the D Street area or in downtown generally? It seemed like a really positive thing from a third party non-finance person. So, and maybe that was covered initially as part of the sort of the context or background, but are there any avenues or doorways that opens, pun intended?
Yeah, I would say yes, 100%. And I'm going to let Mike, you want to talk about the new the legislation that just got passed and how will this potentially affect this corridor area that we've been talking about?
Well, I think that the new legislation, the language from SB 77 that's in SB 179 will, as soon as the governor signs it into law, give the assembly the ability to craft some economic development language that will provide a tax abatement that I think could have a dramatic impact on this and other areas of the city, depending on how that's implemented. Again, I hesitate to say too much about how it would work specifically in this area because there's been no language crafted yet, but but I think it will have a substantial impact because it will basically double the amount of incentive and tax abatement that, or allows for doubling of the amount of the abatement that's available now to folks and to developers. And so I think it's pretty substantial. I think it could have a big impact if you have $100 million development and you're able to get a 10-year abatement on 100% of your tax. Then I think that's pretty substantial.
Similarly,
This is John Hendricks.
Oh, go ahead.
This is John Hendricks. Why are people incentivized on paying taxes and us that own property are not getting tax breaks? It should all be about generating. That was one of my questions. How much are you anticipating you're going to make from property tax for this development?
Yeah,
Or is
John,
another
that's a really
giveaway? The utilities, Chugach Electric pays no property tax. You know, all the nonprofits pay no property tax. Churches pay no property tax.
right. So, John, it's a good question. And while there's, I don't want to have a property tax debate to talk about this specific thing right now. What I will tell you is that generally speaking, when you give an abatement out, it's for development. So let's say, for example, that you take a piece of property, like let's say you take a parking lot like Block 102 and you build a $100 million development on it. You don't receive a tax abatement on the value of the property at the base. You still pay that. But what you do is you get an abatement on the future value of that. And so it doesn't cost current taxpayers anything. But when that tax abatement ends, because we were able to spur development, that creates property tax base in the future for us. And that lowers everybody's property tax. So if we could spur $500 million in development, while we may give all of those people a tax abatement to do that development, in 10 years, you've got another $500 million in property taxes on $500 million on that, the property tax on that development that helps spread the tax out around amongst all the taxpayers. And so I think it's a definite advantage. And the idea here is that we need to spur development. We're in a situation right now where private developers can't reverse this trend that we have, which is the lack of housing and the costs and all those things. But anyway, that's a development or discussion for another day. And I am really sorry, but I have to get to a doctor's appointment. I was only scheduled to be here until 12. So I have to jump off right now and get to my doctor's appointment.
Now the $1 million we get to study, we need to find out why we have to incentivize people to develop our city. There's a fundamental root cause problem there. And that probably needs to be looked at.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that. It looks like Mike had to jump off, and I'm going to say again, I see Radhika. You've been posting about the zoning in for D Street. Daniel, did you want to mention? Did you want to talk a little bit about what Radhika is posting on our chat?
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I've been spamming the chat, everyone. Radhika had asked about the height restriction around Town Square Park. So I just put in what the current restrictions are. It's up to 200 feet. They've changed. It was by quadrant. So in some cases, it went from 85 to 200 to 115 to 200. And then I also just put in what the existing height limits are. So right now in B2A and B2C or B2B, there's no height limit except for what the Merrill Field limitations are. Above a certain number of stories, you have to start articulating the building a little bit, but below that, you can just build basically a box. And then in B2C, there is a height limit of 76 feet. So, and forgive my crude drawing, but I just wanted to put that in there for reference.
No, that's great. Johnny, you got your hand up.
The other question I had to, and this is kind of the opposite of maybe the incentivization that John was just referencing, but there was some chatter about land value and property taxes related to surface parking lots. Is there a potential for that to have any impact on development if something like that were for? So in essence, the land value in the building, right now the land is undervalued, as I understand it, in the mill rate calculations, and the buildings are overvalued or true value. Whereas, a surface parking lot, because you're paying a lower tax amount, becomes something that you can frankly sit on, or if you demo a building and you sit on a parking lot, that's essentially surface in shorthand in my mind, are incentivized by the tax code as opposed to developing property, which then contributes base to the base. Is that something that this project could seek to highlight in some way, the disparity there, or has the team have any particular opinion, or is that studied in terms of the property tax value comparative for the existing code and potentially for a future code that would value land differently?
Yeah, so
It's kind of a
that's
complex question, but
no, that's a great question. And actually, it's been a topic of conversation. We actually have not done a pro forma build out on that. What is the land value of a parking lot and what could it look like based on the pro forma and taxes, and how does that affect all of downtown Anchorage? And I think that would be probably the next step going forward, is to do that kind of value study. I think you highlighted one really important thing, is that we do have a number of parking lots in downtown, and many people have made remarks about it. And it's also devaluing downtown. The land value, of course, property taxes are much lower. And so potentially, if we're going to focus on parking lot development, it looks like with downtown, it would only be the advantage of downtown to do that. And from there, the tax value would go up for those specific areas that get redeveloped. But it would be a really interesting study about how does this affect the total landscape of downtown, and I can definitely pass that on as a maybe a project for ACDA to do.
and I think it would add value if you were to redevelop parking lots too. It would maximize the investment in the existing parking structures as well, right? So if we're overparked, the land value of those parking garages increases if you're to concentrate vehicles in that way. So to me, it's almost like a 3-point benefit if either we increase the tax value, the taxable value of parking lots, or we incentivize construction, vertical construction, especially 24-hour construction like residences, because then that adds that next layer. So anyway, so I see minimum of 3 benefit.
And definitely
not that I want to increase taxes, but I also, I'm not a big fan of that, but I think we should fairly tax how land uses and the resources that a parking lot uses is probably more substantial than the building in and of itself. Because you're using the roads, you're incentivizing using roads as opposed to living there and using a simple sidewalk. So anyway, just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you, Johnny, for that. Daniel, you got your hand raised, and then.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to Johnny's sort of thought. Maybe looking at that another way is when I look at a parking lot, I see that it's sort of a catchment system, right? But it's a catchment system which depends on the public infrastructure, which sort of feeds their profit margin. And again, I don't want to demonize the parking. It makes perfect sense. Like it's a good business and it makes sense. But it makes sense when you have a system that is designed to basically feed that. And so one of the things about the downtown streets engineering study is changing some of the priorities of the streets downtown, because everybody says we want them to be slower. We don't need as much street as we have. So that might be another way. And again, I'm totally speculating here, but if you change the design of the streets in the way that it sort of channels vehicles one way or another, you might end up changing this sort of the need for storing vehicles in downtown in a way. So maybe that's a way without, looking at taxes or this and that. Because when we were doing this process, I believe we talked with Diamond and they said, look, we're a land management company. We're a property company. We just want to develop and do what makes the most sense with the land, but they're going to keep them as parking lots as long as it makes sense to make parking lots. And if you're along a DOT facility or a big, wide, fast driving facility, it makes a lot of sense to have a parking lot. So that might be another thing that comes out of the downtown streets engineering study, is looking at, one, as some of these pieces change, it's also making sure that as maybe the land use piece changes, the transportation piece changes to accommodate, right? So that people aren't left without a choice, but they see that, well, this is changing a little bit, but I'm also getting some new choices here as well, so that people are able to, make that calculus of the various costs and benefits of travel choices. So just another thing to think about, looking at hitting the right-of-way piece without hitting the private property piece.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dan. And Chris just mentioned regarding the, different uses of land value taxation, the Assembly Community and Economic Development Committee, it's been a topic of conversation for some time. And even prior to that, it's been a topic of conversation of looking at the parking lots taxation differently to probably discourage more parking lots in downtown. So if you're not a downtown person, what we have been seeing in the last 5 or 10 years is that if there's a building that gets demoed, it's now then being turned into a parking lot versus another building. And obviously we don't want to see that, because we want to see more buildings being built versus more parking lots, which we don't need more parking lots in downtown. So thank you for that. Any other questions for the group? And again, I think our intention is that ACDA will be putting up a project page, because D Street is going to be a big focus for ours, especially with our attention on Block 102. The presentation will be saved, and we're going to start re-engaging the community again on this master plan that was put together through our Brownfield Coalition. And then it looks like Healy might have a question, and I'm just waiting for that. Oh, what is the projected timeline for the first lot? Oh gosh. So I'll answer that one, Healy. So number one, we are definitely focused on how can we purchase Block 102? How can we develop it? And I think, is Jim Weingartner on here? Jim, do you want to step in and be able to answer Haley's question? Jim Weingartner is our project acquisition director for ACDA, and it's one of his big focus for Block 102.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Melinda. So, you know, we're looking at acquiring the property now rather than doing a trade. So if we acquire it, we'd like to acquire it with a partner together with a partner. So that would be like a joint venture with a developer is a possibility. Then once we acquire it, then we'd go out for a request for proposal for the development and try to get it moved along to a development of housing and mixed use. We'd like to see some restaurants and shops as well.
And Jim, she asked the question, I mean, if we were a magic ball, what kind of timeline are you looking at?
Well, we'd like to do it pretty quickly. You know, the agreement between the city and the state is in place that, you know, they want to make a deal. So we'd like to strike while the iron's hot, so to speak, on that, and make sure it gets consummated before too long. But these things take some time, so we'll have to work with the state and also any potential developer that wants to move along with us.
Perfect. And then Haley, just more specifics, Block 102 is one of our larger, it's up on our top 10 focus for the agency. So Jim and Mike are very focused on acquiring the property right now. And then more updates always happen on our ACDA page. So we provide the public through our board meetings, lots of updates. You're welcome to attend. Our agenda is always on there, and we are oftentimes talking about Block 102. And that is through acda.net. I also just posted a link to our website, which has our resource page. I know Daniel posted the D Street plan, but we also have the resources of 2 housing studies. One was the housing real estate study that we just recently did, and then also the D Street master plan, that our area-wide plan that we just did. Johnny has a question. How do we support housing projects by ACDA and or advocate for vertical construction by ACDA? So Jim, do you want to answer that one for Johnny, or I can? So however you want to do it.
You're asking how to support our efforts? Well, really, if we need developers, we need people to step forward and willing to invest. You know, we're going to do what we can to help with that. You know, with regard to tax abatement. possibly. And also, you know, we have connections, of course, with the planning department, permitting, so we can help navigate through those processes. But we're gonna do that to help you.
Perfect. And then how do you think private companies demo buildings and construct parking lots? Evidently, because that's the best. Oh, that was just a comment. Got it. And then Chris, looks like Chris is typing in a question, and I'll just wait for Chris. And we're getting really close to our 12:30 time. And again, I appreciate everyone. We will keep everybody in the loop of things going forward with D Street. So we'll keep you on a list if you want to get any updates.
I wasn't typing a question, by the way.
Oh, okay, sorry. So we got Johnny. Okay, thank you, Johnny. I appreciate that. So I'm assuming that everybody would like to be continually updated about this project area. We'll keep you on a list. And so if I do email you and you don't want to be updated on this, just reply back to me and say, you know, Melinda, I'm not really interested. But and one of the questions that I'm going to go back to that Johnny asked, how can you support ACDA? The big one is that if we've got some projects that we want to move forward and we are having to go in front of the Anchorage Assembly for our projects, we always want your support. And if you testify or write letters of support for our projects, stay involved with ACDA through their board meetings. The other one that we just recently passed, and it was really a coalition of a whole bunch of people, including some of the people that are on here today, the recent legislation that ACDA moved forward, we really did this because of everyone's support, and that's how it got supported and voted on and moved forward for approval. So that was our tax legislation. So those kind of efforts, we're asking everyone, if you feel compelled that a project's moving forward that you really like, we always ask for endorsement. And I think that we also equally will support anybody else's projects moving forward. So we've been trying really hard. If Anchorage Assembly has some viable ideas, long range planning, if they are moving forward legislation, we try to support them. So we just want to continue that movement forward for improvement for our city. So with that said, everyone, thank you so much for attending this update luncheon, and we will keep you updated for everything that we do for this area. And again, thank you. And if you have friends that do want to keep up to date, just email me and I'll add them to our list to make sure everyone else is also updated. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks all.